2.5 million people have come in the last 2 years. You wonder why you can't get a house.
You may be familiar with Nigel Farage because he's friendly with your own Donald Trump. And as I've told you whenever I've discussed him before, that I've had sort of public jousts with Nigel Farage on a couple of occasions at least. But at times like this, when one thing that I'm certain of is that we absolutely cannot rely on the establishment and that there is no viable movement towards bringing down these institutions, you have to look, I suppose, mostly at what is it the establishment doesn't want. That's about as good as it can get. There is no vision. There is no vision from anybody. Perhaps the best thing we can do is bring them somehow to their knees by denying them their preferred pathway. Their preferred pathway currently is Keir Starmer. That's what the establishment want. That's what the actual powerful want. The people whose interests will not be affected negatively, only amplified and improved by the election of Britain's next Prime Minister, who has connections to the CIA. I don't want that to sound opaque. Nevertheless, he had a couple of meetings with the CIA. And as I've said to you before, the kind of leader you would want would be the kind of man that throughout their opposition to the governing party was saying stuff like, Julian Assange shouldn't be in jail. We've not given the geezer a trial. All he did was spoke out against war crimes. Hang on a minute. And in fact, he's just kind of a journalist, isn't he, really? I mean, if he's in prison just for receiving and publishing information, isn't there a case that journalists everywhere could be charged with the Espionage Act? Isn't this unprecedented? That's not what you have in Keir Starmer. So you have to start looking at what you have in some of these populist figures, even if there might be myriad, dozens of ways that you don't agree with them. Here is a man who has certainly captured the hearts of many people in our country and who the establishment and mainstream media loathe. And indeed, it seems to me at least like many legacy media organisations are collaborating in a way that's all too familiar to me to bring about scandals and insidious attacks. Again, please don't take this as me saying this is necessarily a political party or movement that I would support. But one I do support was one that was just outlined pretty articulately by Tucker Carlson: the will of the people. The will of the people. What the people want is what should happen in a democracy. And of course, you have the right to lead and guide and suggest and persuade. All of those things are important. But what you can't do is ignore, bamboozle, censor and control and possibly create, but certainly exploit crises in order to legitimise further authoritarianism. Here's Nigel Farage giving a little bit of a tough time on a British TV show and responding pretty articulately, I'd have to say.
You also run you are online on a website called Cameo where you'll record paid shorts of you doing roasts or pep talks for people.
He's not embarrassed by that because he's not embarrassed by sort of ordinariness and ordinary culture. You go on Cameo, you accept £70 and you go, happy birthday, happy birthday. It's there's a snobbery throughout the culture. There's this elitism and progressivism. I'm not accusing this like individual person in the audience. How TV shows work, you know this, right? Is like they ask the audience if they've got any questions, then they look for questions that were the sort of questions they would like asked. That's their opportunity to editorialise. Then they can claim that this was a question that was asked by the audience when in fact it was a pre-agreed question, the kind of question they were going to ask anyway. Anyway, what I mean by the elitism and the progressivism is progressivism. I don't mean cultural progressivism in the way that you might assume, like around gender identity or whatever. Again, I believe people, do what you want to do. It's just not really interesting to me. Freedom, glory, love, enlightenment, awakening, so many important things to discuss. I'm in progressivism as in the idea that human beings are in general ascending through technology and medicine, where there certainly has been remarkable, miraculous almost progress. So we're sort of moving towards something, which in a sense is a kind of an idea derived from Christianity, because that would be the second coming or the rapture. And the idea that we are improving all the time, that there haven't been sort of lost civilizations and peaks of glory, and that there isn't a spiritual dimension to our nature that is ultimately from what our purpose is derived. No, it's through technology, rationalism and materialism that will make our achievements. Elsewhere, we believe in a kind of elitism, a kind of aristocracy, not only of ideas, but of intra-related cults and classes. There's a kind of an acceptance that ordinary people aren't good enough anymore, that ordinary Americans or ordinary French people or ordinary British people, they're saying sort of disgusting. We don't want to listen to anymore. Perhaps that was a big lie all along, the pledge of socialism and Marxism, that the bourgeoisie and the intelligentsia would somehow galvanise and represent the proletariat, would create systems where ordinary people were represented. Certainly, Maoism didn't work out too well. Stalinism didn't work out too well. So it's difficult to make an argument for the success of socialism, except for where it is derived, again, I would say, from Christian principles like fellowship, fraternity, service, kindness. They say often in our country that British socialism is derived as much from Methodism as from Marx, meaning be kind. Be kind, look after one another, not empower the state, not centralised power. Have some values in your systems of government. Now, this kind of elitism that you can sort of see here of like, oh, why would you participate on a website where people pay 50 quid and you say happy birthday to someone or whatever? Like, that's something that's endemic in our culture. Someone mentioned populism there. We had a populist movement and moment in our country a few years ago. Jeremy Corbyn was very, very popular, and the lengths to which the establishment went to crush that guy. Accusations of anti-Semitism, people within his own party, including Keir Starmer, turning against him, working against him, ensuring that he was destroyed and crushed. There was a lot of intrigue and interest because if you have a prime minister that says stuff like, I'm going to stand up against corporations, I'm going to regulate the city of London, which seems to have this odd principality of power all of its own, then of course that's something that's considered ultimately a global threat. That movement was crushed. Now what we have in the United Kingdom is a nationalist populist movement in the case of of Nigel Farage's Reform Party. Now, again, there's a sort of a focus on Britain first. He obviously plainly considers the most significant issue to be immigration, and I know that's an issue that concerns a lot of you. And I suppose if you have a nation, the nation has borders. And even here, in answering this question, he talks about types of immigration. Let's have a look at how he responds to that question, which I took as an opportunity to explain my own thoughts on both progressivism and elitism, though I'm not suggesting that the individual young person selected there is in any way a representative of them, just someone that was selected because their question fitted in with a narrative that the BBC would have wanted to use anyway.
I was just wondering, your cheapest ones you do are £70. If I paid you £70 now, would you admit that this country would be nothing without our rich history of immigration?
Well, I tell you what.
Another thing that's a bit Trump-like there is you see he's not embarrassed and he's not defensive. Do you see how he's not sort of like, no, actually, no, look, I only do that app because I was, I'm trying to earn a few quid, right? He's just like, no, actually, listen, I want to take this opportunity to talk to you. It's interesting, man.
And this is what's gone wrong. Because you talk about immigration, and it ran from after the war up until the millennium, a net 30 to 40,000 a year. And yes, it worked. In fact, we had the most successful immigration policies of any country in the whole of Europe. No question. Now, it is so totally out of control. Just think about this. 2.5 million people have come in the last 2 years. You wonder why you can't get a house. You wonder why your rents have gone up 25% in 4 years. You wonder why our infrastructure is struggling. You wonder why, we have to build a new house every 2 minutes just to cope with the numbers. And that's the issue. It's now running at numbers that are literally unimaginable and are diminishing the quality of life of everybody in this country. And frankly, this should be the biggest issue of this election.
You could only improve that by saying, and that's £70, please.
Hey, this is exciting. We've got a great partner today. It's Rumble. But beyond Rumble, it's Rumble's latest venture. Let me ask you first, are you a Sleepy Joe type character with zero cognitive performance, struggling to muster focus and brain power for basic things like running the United States of America? You've got to stop drinking woke liberal coffee that hates you and your way of life and start your day by drinking Rumble's very own 1775 coffee. This is going to be the best tasting coffee you've ever had. Seriously good, ethically sourced from a family farm in the high altitude mountains of Bolivia. Not in the Bolivian lowlands run not by a family but by a single man still living with a pet. No! Instead of waking up and drinking your big corporation owned woke ideology coffee that's probably making you sick from the pesticides it's sprayed with, try Rumble's 1775 revolutionary coffee. Support freedom of speech. Build a parallel economy that actually values you and loves you. My favourite? It's dark, of course. I've always found the lure of the dark irresistible. I'm sorry, how can I stay mad at you? You're just going to have to wait over there for a little while. Level up your morning routine with a 1775 coffee. Sleep all night knowing your hard-earned dollary-doos are going towards supporting freedom-loving creators like me on Rumble. Visit 1775coffee.com now, pick up your first bag, use the code BRAND to save 10% on your first order. Oh, come on. Why choose, Okay, back to the content.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.